Hey, Being at Work listeners, this is your host, Andrea Butcher. Welcome back to another episode. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about today's conversation. It's very cold as we record this in central Indiana, but I'm sitting here with a cup of tea and I'm sitting here with such a dynamic woman that I'm so grateful to be able to highlight. And today's episode represents what this show is all about: betting on yourself, trusting yourself, being yourself, leaning into the call. Today's guest is Amy Brown, the CEO of Authentics, and she's on a mission to help humans understand humans. And she followed the call to create her business because, as she says, she felt like it would be wrong to ignore it. So listen in as she shares her story and we talk about the conviction necessary to take a massive leap and the letting go and the loss you feel as you step away from things you depended on. So, Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrea. It's great to be here. I appreciate this chance to talk about all those things. So.
Yeah. And you strike me as someone who's just so real. You know, after the first time I talked to you, I told you, like, I just want to hang out with you because you're so cool. But I want to acknowledge the just challenge that you're navigating through today. We've had some really bad weather here in central Indiana, and you didn't have power or water this morning. And yet here you are at work, leading, doing all the things, looking freaking fabulous.
That's very kind of you to say. The screen hides some things,
Well, whatever you're doing a good job. So
Well,
just
thank you. It's just life. We all have to show up every day with whatever challenges, big and small, we're dealing with. So,
isn't that the truth? Yeah. Well, I appreciate you showing up. Give us some context. I set up in the intro, that so much of your story is about betting on yourself, but give us some context. Tell us a little bit about the journey that got you to where you are today.
yeah. Well, I think it's a journey to learn to bet on yourself. I didn't always feel that way. I didn't always feel that confident in myself. I grew up middle child, two brothers, daughter of a special ed teacher, my mom, and my dad, a surgeon, a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. And I was a very shy kid. And then, made it through college and kind of landed in a education pathway of social work. But then early in my career, started to have some opportunities to lead, probably at a stage or an age where I certainly had no idea what I was doing, but I was leading people that were much more tenured than I was. But I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, in terms of thinking I know what I'm doing or making assumptions about decisions to make. I made incorrect judgment calls. I also tried on a lot of different personas as I navigated like the working world. Like, if I want to get ahead, who do I need to emulate? And, I looked at the examples around me, and some of those examples were great, and some of those examples were probably not so great. And I kind of took on a persona, if you will, of this kind of really competitive, take no prisoners type persona. And then when I was in my early 40s, I'd been married a number of years. We had just had our fourth child. She was just a young little thing at the time. And I started to really get more reflective on my life, where I had been, how I had gotten there. And I started to look in the mirror and take a more humble look in the mirror, if you will. And I recognized that some of that persona that I had taken on to become successful in the career I had built so far no longer matched who I really was as a person or the values that I wanted to spend the rest of my life trying to live out. And so I would call it a reckoning with my true authentic self that happened in my early 40s. And it was really, that was the pivotal time where I transitioned into being myself more authentically and being willing to take a bet on myself.
What led up to that? Was there something specific? Was it gradual? You said you found yourself in this much more reflective place. Was there something that led to that?
I wish I had this like very clear light bulb moment, but for me, it was more gradual. Certainly, having children brings you a perspective that I didn't have before. And I found myself reflecting because of children. I think I had enough years under my belt working in the working world. I had enough wins where I had gotten promotions and all the kind of title things or responsibility things I had checked off the list. And I was at the time, and I say this very kind of humbly, but I was making more money than I had ever made before in my life or that I ever thought, years before I would. And so I think it was like I had arrived at this moment of what my younger self had thought I'd always wanted to be. And I got there and I was like, this isn't it, actually. The promotions and the titles and the salary that I've arrived at is not what is bringing me fulfillment. It's got to be something deeper and bigger for me. And so I think it was that kind of gradual wake up call.
Yeah, and that's when the call started to emerge. Well, I wanted to dig into that because it's such an interesting story because I mean, people would look at your life from the outside and wow, she's got it all. She's got this amazing family and husband and job and making so much money and all of the things. And yet internally, the reflection led you to like, yeah, this isn't what I want.
hmm
And that is hard and takes a ton of courage to listen to that.
Yeah. Most people, rightfully so, like at that time in my life, as I was kind of socializing this idea of me leaving all of my corporate career to start something new, they thought I was, not only did they think I was crazy, but irresponsible. And I mean, I can see why. I can see why they would have thought that. But for me, it all kind of came down to like what is the purpose of your life, your role as a mom, your role as a human being, and what is that purpose worth?
And modeling for your kids, I know, is also something that when we've talked in the past, you've talked a lot about. You want to be really intentional about the example that you are setting for them.
Yes. I mean, my kids at that age were just getting to the age where they could start to participate in the little leagues and the extracurricular activities and all the things, right? And I remember at that stage of motherhood feeling a ton of societal pressure to get my kid like in all the things and set them up for success and the idea certainly of preparing them through financially giving them what they needed was a huge pressure and everyone around me was focused on that. And here I was contemplating potentially quitting my career. I was the only income earner for our house because we very intentionally chose, and my husband graciously agreed to be the one to stay at home with our kids. And so I was the sole provider of income and insurance. And here I was thinking of quitting that and isn't that putting my family at risk? And ultimately for me it came down to, well, there's the risk of in the near term here, not being able to give your kids all the bells and whistles of what they may want or what you may want, or there's the risk of not teaching them what it means to sacrifice and work hard and go after what they're capable of. And I decided at the end of the day, it was more important to model for them what it means to take risks, what it means to sacrifice, make personal sacrifices what it means to work hard and not get immediate gratification. I think the world is in such a short supply of that type of teaching and mentorship. And I felt like that was more important than making my kids and myself feel financially secure in the short term.
Damn, that's good. Well, and yes, all of that. And the other thing you're modeling for them is trusting yourself because you had all of this. And yet you've talked about how there was this persistent call that you could not ignore. And I suspect you have shared that with them. And what message does that send? Listen to that internal guidance system. It's always with you.
And I think more so now than ever, I really do worry about generations that have grown up, fully immersed in kind of a social media virtual world where like the external world is telling them who they are, what to believe. And it's such a high velocity, a high frequency, right? I see it happening to my teenagers all the time. And it's like, where's the space for that internal small voice inside of you to have space, right? And I am so grateful that my parents instilled in me the skill set needed to hear that voice, to tune my ears to hearing that voice. And I I feel like I would be robbing my kids of that opportunity if they didn't learn to find that for themselves.
I think that's such a helpful way to think about it. Where's the space for that voice inside of you to speak? Because life is so loud. Our society is so loud. There's so much competing for our attention. It takes a ton of discipline and courage. You've talked about the persistent call. You must have created space for that voice during that time because you said like your people are telling you, Amy, you're nuts for doing this and things are good. And so how did you create that space? Was the voice just so loud you couldn't ignore it? Like how did that play out?
Yeah, around that time of my life, I started this practice that I had learned from someone else. It was an annual practice of choosing a word. I'm sure many of your listeners do that or have heard of doing that. And I started doing that. My very first word was in 2017, and I chose the word fire. And actually, really, it's the word chooses me. I feel like this word comes up in my brain. And so I chose the word fire in 2017. And I had a practice of journaling over that word and paying attention to how that word was showing up for me. And I think just the practice of doing something every day that allows you to reflect and listen and kind of take a macro view, like rising above as though you're climbing into a balcony and looking over your day or your week or your life. I started getting into a habit of doing that type of thing with my word being kind of the focal point that I could use. And that practice became really helpful for me as I that's what allowed me to create space to listen. And it just started as a flicker of an idea, but it wouldn't leave me. I just found myself thinking about it, and then I started verbalizing it to some close friends and family members. And what I'll never forget, one of those mentors said to me, "Well, Amy, try it on for size." And he didn't mean like literally this idea, like he meant like start to emotionally and mentally imagine what it would be like for you, what you would have to do, what you would have to undo, and notice how you feel. And that was a very helpful piece of advice because I did start kind of emotionally and mentally trying it on. And this cultivated over about a 2-year period of time before I actually like turned in my resignation and left.
So I was just going to ask, so when did you, so 2017 fire, you're emotionally and mentally preparing. So 2019, is that when you launch the business?
It was mid 2018 that I turned in my resignation, and then I kind of earnestly started the business at the end of 2018, beginning.
Okay. There you go. So about a year then you were like mentally preparing for this, talking with trusted advisors, leaning into the call. Well, and you talked about in that mentally preparing for some of the things you're going to have to undo as well. Taking that leap, I imagine as I've done similar things in my life, it's all of the emotions, isn't it? It's all of the excitement and even there's something so invigorating about trusting yourself, but it also is really, really hard and painful because of the things you're letting go. And I know that was your experience.
Yes. One of the things that was important and also very challenging was we brought our whole family into the conversation because I didn't want to hide from my kids that we were needing to make some sacrifices financially and lifestyle wise, but I also didn't want to scare them, right? So it was this like fine line and this balance. So, we talked about it at the dinner table, and you always want to provide a sense of psychological safety for your kids. So making sure that they knew that I felt confident that we were going to be okay, but it was going to mean some short-term sacrifices, which meant I realize what I'm about to say is first world problems type things. But we were no longer going to be shopping at Target and going out to eat or traveling for vacation time. We were no longer going to be using our discretionary. There wasn't going to be discretionary income. There was going to be no income. In fact, we didn't tell them this, but my husband and I lived for about 18 months without putting a single dollar into our bank account, which meant that any money that my new business that I just started made was pouring back into the business. And so we had to live really, really frugally. So our goal was to show up with joy and a sense of safety for our kids. And that became the currency of our okayness more than the physical purchase of things.
As you reflect on that now, wow, that's powerful. Like what impact did that have on you, on the family, on the relationships?
I mean, I look back and I think it is one of the most important things we've ever done as parents. And I had no idea. I thought it would be full of just like a little bit of fear, disappointment, oh shucks, we can't go do this thing we wish we could do. And it was that at the very beginning for a few weeks. I would, want to go buy a pair of shoes that I saw online or something like that. And I'd realize, nope, you can't. But honestly, removing those things from our lives created a much deeper well from which to draw joy from. And I kind of realized, like, wow, I had been relying on things as a way to avoid deeper, deeper things I needed to pay attention to. And I never would have thought that about myself, prior to being forced into it. And now I just think about how grateful I am that I had the opportunity to experience that. And also to see that our happiness was not dependent on these things. And nor was it nor were those things actually affording us any happiness. It was really creature comforts, but that's about it.
So you had all these incredible outcomes that you had not anticipated by taking this leap, by betting on yourself. I mean, life changes and not things that not only were so good for you as a human, but for your family and for your relationships. And yeah, it's the story behind the story, because we've been talking for 20 minutes and we haven't talked about authentics. We haven't talked about the thing that you created, but there are all these things that you have created as a result. And that's why when we named this show Being at Work, because I wanted to highlight our humanity at work. No doubt, like you are a better leader today because of all of these experiences that you've had. You're when you're a different person. The evolution that's occurred, I suspect, as a result of all of these lessons. I mean, this is just one. You no doubt have a whole list of them.
Yes. Well, actually, so the name of our company, Authentics, came from the realization that I had in this season of my life of wanting to live a more authentic life. It was way more, the name of our business was way more rooted in that than it was like the product we were building. And this idea around, I wanted to live more authentically for the rest of my life. And I also wanted to attempt to create a culture where the people who signed on to our mission could also figure out who they are. So for example, like we today have everybody gets to choose a word every year. And even though we're 130 people now, like we have a word reveal session every January
Oh, I
where
love
we
that.
we share our words, and then we have accountability partners who we meet with throughout the year and talk to about our word, all with the goal, not of, the word isn't so that we can hit our KPIs. These are personal or that people are invited in to reflect upon. And it's not that I'm, just wanted to create a place where we could all talk about our feelings all day long, but because I believe that healthier businesses are created by healthier human beings. And I think that authenticity, living authentically, is one of the best gifts we can give ourselves. And so, yeah, that's the story behind the name.
Being more of who you already are. That's the goal. Isn't that the work that we're all doing? Peeling back the layers. What I so appreciate about your story is we started with by betting on yourself. Like that is you becoming more of who you are, dropping the persona or aspects of the persona, listening, making space for the voice, listening to the voice, taking action based on that, rallying your people around that, and discovering so much more of who you are in the process. It's also connected. So I have to ask, what is your word for 2025?
My word for 2025 scares the hell out of me, actually.
The best kind of word.
Oh, the word that has chosen me is Sabbath, which I know is a word that has probably a lot of, well, it's rooted in kind of religious background, but it's really this concept of rest. And it scares me because my whole identity is tied up in activity and action. I have a friend who's like, Amy, you're a woman of action. And yes, and I feel like I am. And sometimes, many times that can be a good thing. And sometimes it's my own continued work. How much is my activity a distraction from the real work? And it scares me to think about this idea of creating space to rest, but that's where I'm going in 25. And I think what the call is, at least right now, is to find ways to create Sabbath amidst the noise, amidst the chaos. Like it's not like you're going to get some sort of sabbatical. You have to create that space in your life. And so we'll see where it takes me.
Well, and it's chosen you. So just like fire came to life, no doubt, Sabbath will come to life. It's almost like that's your doing. It's resting. And you were an Enneagram 8, if I remember you telling me that.
I am. And so to say that you need rest feels weak
Right.
for an 8.
It's that vulnerability. It's that, yeah. Uh-huh. So good for you. I can see why it scares the hell out of you. And I think that's the best kind of word.
Yes, it is.
This is good. The mission, you were on a personal mission to help humans understand humans. Is that your mission? Is that Authentic's mission? Talk a little bit about the connectedness. I mean, it seems like so much of who you are and your background and your expertise and the gap in the market that you saw is infused into this business, but talk about how your personal mission fuels Authentics. Tell my listeners about Authentics because it's a really cool model.
Thank you. Yeah, if you walk into the front door of our corporate headquarters here, you will see on our wall, helping humans understand humans. So it's very much a part of the fabric of Authentics. We are a company that helps large healthcare enterprises listen to the everyday customer conversations that flow in and out of their business through their contact center channel. You've called, Andrea, I'm sure you've had to call customer service a time or two, and you probably hear when you call, this call may be recorded for quality and monitoring purposes. Well, what we do at Authentics is we take in those recordings in very large volumes, and we use artificial intelligence and human intelligence to listen for the macro stories of what's happening in these conversations for the purpose of helping the companies we serve understand the humans they serve in a more effective way. So that's really about, I mean, for me, yes, we're a tech company. We are an AI company. We are a high growth venture backed company. But if we didn't have a mission that I personally believed in and that the authenticians that work here believe in, I don't think that all of the milestones and metrics we've been able to achieve would have happened. I think that people show up to work at their best when they believe in what they're doing. And so having a mission behind our business has been very, very important to us.
Well, it's like you took the leap because of your conviction. No doubt, like that drives you because it is hard creating what you're creating and the venture back pressure that you must feel. I mean, it is a daily personal challenge. So I suspect that the call and the conviction have been helpful.
Yeah. The only way, in fact, that I've been able to survive is the conviction. If I didn't have the conviction in why we're doing what we're doing, I would have walked away because it is too damn hard. It is hard. It is hard.
It is hard. And it's lonely. I remember the first time we talked, Amy, you said, nobody told me how lonely this would be. And I felt that to my core.
Yes, it's very lonely. In so many ways. I mean, it's always it's cliche, right? It's lonely at the top. But I think as a founder of something that is new and innovative, it's lonely when you're out there trying to show a different way to a world that hasn't seen what you're laying down before and they're not sure if they're going to pick it up or not. That's scary and takes courage too. So I think it's a combination of both being a CEO. There's loneliness in that, but there's also loneliness in this idea of trying to make a new path for a new thing out there. It's hard.
Which is why Sabbath is so important. Moments of renewal and connection. How do you, and maybe the question could also be like, what does Sabbath look like? But how do you take care of yourself to show up on days when you don't have water or power? Like, the tagline of this show is taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. So I always like to ask leaders, how do you take care of yourself?
For a long time, I bristled at the whole kind of movement around self-care because what I was seeing on social media or mainstream media around self-care just felt like spa days and massage therapists and manicures and like taking time off. And I don't know, that didn't feel like a fit for me, even though all those things are nice. For me, what self-care means is tapping into what brings me joy. And I love to laugh. For example, if I'm not laughing at least once, a good belly laugh at least once a day, then like, ooh, that's a sign for me. So having a sense of humor, being with people that bring a sense of humor. My husband's very funny, and I just so appreciate that about him. I think having connections with people that you can share things with that are deep, that brings me joy and a sense of fulfillment. And yeah, just creating space to be present. Those are the things that bring me rest and joy and keep me going. And so when I have a really hard set of meetings or, a hard string of days, what I try to do is create space for reconnecting with people and laughter and all of those things.
Well, those things that are authentic to you, it gets back to the power of authentic, knowing what it is that brings you back and creating space for those things.
Well, and you know what I've discovered through this work of trying to build a culture of authenticity, we don't all necessarily know what it means for us to become authentic, and that's okay. Like it's okay. Just going on the journey of asking, gosh, what does it mean to be authentically myself? Like that's the place to start. So many employees that have started with our business, like it's a journey just to figure out, like it takes a while just to figure out how much baggage we've loaded ourselves up with because of the trauma or the survival that we've or the coping that we've had to go through, right?
Isn't that true? Yeah. Good point. Yeah, you have to know who you are in order to be who you are. And isn't that the journey? The self-exploration journey that we are all on. So it's a great point. I mean, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be authentic, but actually I don't have any idea who that is. I'm figuring that out.
The starting place really is not who am I authentically, but what are the things that no longer fit?
What are those things that no longer fit? Because that feels clearer. I know when something's off. It's kind of like you were saying earlier. You were realizing the persona that you'd taken on. Like, yeah, this is not consistent for me.
Yes. That became the easier pathway. That is how my journey of like being intentional about becoming authentically myself. It definitely started with not here's who I am, but more like who am I not that I feel like that I feel like I'm giving a lot of time and pressure or attention to.
I love that. Who am I not? And paying attention to when it feels like there's that internal. I think it's button up against that internal guidance system, and she's sending messages. Oh my gosh. We've come full circle because betting on yourself has gotten you closer to yourself. I
Yes.
thought that was way more profound in my head. But it is your story. I mean, I think we'll even call this episode like betting on yourself because isn't there's just something so magical about that. But that's hard. It's hard work and it's not all like fun and rosy and it's really, really awful. And it's the letting go. I'm so glad you dug into that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Okay, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest at the end of the conversation that are great connection questions. And no doubt, they'll bring us back to some of the things that are authentic to you. So, question number 1, Amy, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Genesis, the Invisible Touch tour, but not because I loved the band, but my big brother loved the band and he was bringing some of his friends and I kind of liked one of the friends.
Oh, so it was a boy that got you to the Genesis concert.
Totally. But it was a memorable concert.
Yeah. Well, Phil Collins. I mean, it's going to be some good times. Question number 2. What makes you feel alive?
Anticipation.
Anticipation. You're a creator, you're a builder. So you like new and next. Is that the anticipation?
Yes, looking forward to something, whether it's like a trip or a holiday or like, are we the only species in the world that has the ability to anticipate? Like, what a gift. I mean,
It is a gift. Okay. And last question. What do you wish people understood about you?
that the sometimes brash exterior or the tough girl posture that I often give, particularly in business settings, is not all there is. There's a soft and gooey center. And sometimes I have a hard time accessing her myself, but she is in there.
But she's there always, wherever you go. There she is.
And I think part of my continued work is getting more comfortable on the soft side of myself and accessing that part of who I am. Because I mean, when you start your own gig, you go into battle, and I feel like I've been in battle mode, fighting for this company with a great deal of conviction, but also like the armor kind of gets heavy.
It does. Well, hopefully in your Sabbath moments will encourage you to take the armor off. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. If our listeners want to connect with you, Amy, what's the best place? Where should they find you?
So LinkedIn is always great for me, although my name is so common, Amy Brown. But if you enter in Authentics, then you'll find me. And you can always go to our website as well, authentics.com.
Great. I'm so appreciative of our conversation. 40 minutes has flown by. That says a lot. I'm lifting you up. I'm rooting for you, particularly for moments of Sabbath in your life, because I know that the world needs more of you, just as you are.
Thanks, Andrea. This has been such a beautiful opportunity to talk. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to never miss a Being at Work story.